I should have sensed something was wrong the moment I stepped out of my car and saw my mother standing at the entrance of the White Ridge Country Club, her arms crossed tightly as if she were holding the entire wedding together with pure force of will. The afternoon sun glinted off the windows, turning the lobby into a blinding wash of gold, and for a brief second, I wondered why she looked at me as though my very presence threatened to unravel everything. I almost did not come. I spent the entire week convincing myself that attending Ashley's wedding was the right thing to do, that no matter how strained our relationship was, or how aggressively she and my mother had pushed me in recent months, I could put it aside for one day. I wore a simple ivory dress I had tailored from one of my mother's older gowns. It was not flashy by any means, but under the ballroom lights it caught a soft shimmer I had not expected. I realized too late that Ashley noticed. She was standing by the wedding cake with a glass of champagne when she saw me walk in, and the expression on her face shifted from surprise to fury in half a heartbeat. Her lips pressed together, and she whispered something to her maid of honor, who gave me a sideways glance as though I had shown up wearing something inappropriate. Before I could greet anyone or sign the guest book, Ashley stormed across the floor, her heels slamming against the marble like gunshots. "Come with me, now!" Her voice was low-controlled, but sharp enough to cut. I hesitated for a moment, but she grabbed my wrist and pulled me down the hallway toward the bridal suite, glaring back at anyone who dared look. When we entered the room, the door slammed behind us. The bridal suite was a hurricane of makeup brushes, half-zipped dress bags, curling irons, still warm, and tools spilling out of every corner. On a small decorative cart near the cake display lay the silver knife set the long blade gleaming under the chandelier. Ashley whirled around and looked me up and down. "What are you wearing?" I stared at her, confused. "It is just a dress. I did not think it would be a problem." "You did this on purpose." Her voice cracked, trembling with anger. "You always have to make everything about you. You could not let me have one day without trying to outshine me." The accusation cut deeper than I expected. My entire life had been spent in her shadow while she was praised, coddled, and protected from every consequence. I had never outshined her. I had only existed beside her. Ashley stepped closer, her eyes narrowing at the lace on my sleeves. "Take it off." I laughed in disbelief. "What are you talking about? Take it off." Her voice dropped to a growl. I stepped back, refusing. Then her attention snapped toward the cake knife. Before I could react, she grabbed the long silver blade off the cart. "Ashley, stop!" She did not. She lunged forward, seizing a handful of my skirt with her free hand and yanking the fabric tight. "I am not letting you ruin my pictures," she hissed. "This will teach you." She raised the knife, aiming for the fabric. I twisted, trying to pull away, but her grip tightened. The knife sliced downward. She meant to cut the dress. I am certain of that even now. But her hand slipped, and instead of cutting only the fabric, the blade tore through the lace, through the layered material, and then into my skin. A scorching pain shot through my side. My breath vanished. I stumbled back as warmth spread beneath my palm. When I looked down, red was blooming across the ivory fabric like some grotesque flower. Ashley's eyes widened with horror. "Oh my God. Oh my God, I did not mean to. I just wanted to ruin the dress." She dropped the knife. It clattered against the floor. The door opened sharply. My mother appeared stepping inside with the calm of someone who already knew what had happened. She looked at Ashley, then at me, then at the blood spilling through my fingers. She did not gasp. She did not hurry to help. Her expression was cold, deliberate, disappointed. "You should have known better," she said with a sigh. "You always ruin everything." I stared at her dizzy, unable to process that she was not shocked, not angry, not even mildly concerned. From the hallway, guests were asking what was going on. Someone tried to open the door, but my mother leaned back and pushed it shut, blocking them out. I felt my knees buckle, and the world begin to slide sideways. As I collapsed toward the floor, I heard her voice one last time, quiet and sharp as a blade. She deserved it. And then everything went dark. When I opened my eyes, the first thing I registered was the ceiling light above me, harsh and clinical, its fluorescent glow cutting through the fog in my vision. My body felt heavy, anchored to the hospital bed by the weight of pain radiating from my side. Every breath sent a dull, throbbing ache through my ribs. I tried to sit up, but a nurse gently pressed a hand to my shoulder and shook her head. "Do not move yet. You lost a significant amount of blood." My lips were dry, my voice barely audible. "What happened?" The nurse hesitated, her eyes shifting toward the doorway. "You were brought in from a wedding venue. Someone said you had an accident with a knife." Accident! The word rang strangely in my ears. Before I could say more, I heard my mother's voice. She entered the room with Ashley close behind both of them, looking far too polished for the situation. Ashley had changed into a backup dress, her makeup retouched, her hair pinned perfectly, as if she were attending a magazine photo shoot, not visiting the sister she had just injured. My mother put on a smile for the nurse, a brittle, controlled expression she wore whenever she wanted the world to think she had everything under control. "Thank you for taking care of her," she said sweetly. "It was such a silly accident." She tripped and fell into the cake knife while helping with the setup. I tried to lift my head. "That is not what happened." My mother's eyes snapped to me, the sweetness gone. Her fingers closed tightly around my hand, her nails digging into my skin just enough to send a warning. "Stop lying. Do not embarrass this family any further." The nurse glanced between us, her brow furrowed. She opened her mouth to ask a question, but before she could, my mother launched into another explanation, louder this time, as if volume alone would make it more believable. "She is always clumsy. She should not have been carrying decorations and a knife at the same time. It was foolish, but she will be fine." Ashley nodded quickly, avoiding my gaze. "Yes, it was just an accident. She tripped." "I did not trip," I whispered. My throat felt tight. Ashley cut me. It slipped. Ashley's voice cracked, trembling with a practiced hint of guilt. "I am so sorry. I never meant for her to get hurt." The nurse's eyes darkened. "I need to confirm the story for the report. Are you sure it was accidental?" She directed the question at me, not them. That small act of fairness made my eyes sting. I opened my mouth ready to tell the truth, but my mother squeezed my hand so hard I winced. Her voice dropped to a chilling whisper. "Think very carefully before you say anything stupid." Ashley looked at me with a mixture of panic and resentment, silently begging me not to implicate her. I was trapped, dizzy with pain, clouding my thoughts. The nurse waited. My mother tightened her grip again. I forced out the faintest answer. I do not know. Maybe it was an accident." The nurse did not look convinced. She scribbled notes on her chart, her expression shifting into something I could not quite read. Suspicion, concern, maybe both. A doctor entered, checked my vitals, and said the cut was deep but missed anything vital. They gave me stitches, bandaged my side, and asked if I had someone who could take me home after monitoring. My mother immediately volunteered, smiling as if she were the picture of maternal devotion. "We will take her home. We will take good care of her." The doctor nodded and left, but the nurse lingered. She stepped closer to the bed and lowered her voice. "My name is Evelyn. I am not trying to interfere with your family, but I want you to know this does not look like an accident. If you need help later, come back here and ask for me directly." Something in her steady, unwavering tone melted the numbness in my chest. For the first time that night, someone believed me. She slid a small card into my hand before walking away. I tucked it beneath the blanket just as my mother turned back to me. "Ready to go." Her voice was cheerful, but her eyes were sharp. Ashley stood behind her, arms folded, shifting nervously from foot to foot. The moment the nurse was gone, my mother's smile disappeared. She leaned close to my ear. "You are going to keep your mouth shut about tonight. Your sister does not deserve to have her life ruined over your dramatics. My dramatics." The wound throbbed beneath the bandages, reminding me of the blade. I wanted to scream. I wanted to tell every doctor, every nurse, every security guard in the building what really happened. But the weight of years of conditioning dragged my voice back into silence. Ashley whispered timidly, "We just want to move on. Do not make this bigger than it is." As if I had stabbed myself. As if my blood on the floor was just an inconvenience in her wedding timeline. The nurse passed by again, and Ashley instantly straightened her posture, wiping the guilt off her face like smudged lipstick. My mother helped me sit up, her grip firm and impatient. "Let us go. We have guests waiting." Guests. A wedding. A celebration. My pain was nothing but a disruption. I slid off the bed, slowly biting down on a groan. When I stood, I felt lightheaded, the room tilting for a second before my vision steadied. My mother placed a guiding hand on my back as if she were helping me, but the pressure was just a reminder. Behave. Outside the ER, the air felt cold, unforgiving. I held the small card Evelyn gave me inside my fist. I did not know it yet, but that tiny piece of paper would become the first weapon I ever had in this family. Ashley wrapped her coat around herself, her voice barely above a whisper. "Please do not say anything. Mom said you will ruin everything if you do." When I finally met her eyes, I felt something shift inside me. It was small, subtle, but real. A crack in the fear that had held me for years. I whispered back, "Maybe everything deserves to be ruined." My mother spun around. "What was that?" I shook my head. "Nothing." She narrowed her eyes, unconvinced, but waved us toward the parking lot. The night swallowed us in silence, and for the first time, I wondered if silence was exactly how they had survived this long. I grew up in a house where silence had weight. It pressed against the walls, slipped under the doors, and settled into the spaces between every breath I took. My mother always said we were a close family, but closeness was never the word I would have chosen. Control was closer to the truth. Control disguised as tradition. Control disguised as love. And when it came to me, that control always took the shape of invisibility. Ashley was the center of everything from the moment she was born. I still remember the way neighbors would come over with little pink blankets and tiny dresses cooing over her while I sat on the couch, swinging my legs, waiting for someone to notice me. My mother would smile proudly and hold Ashley up for everyone to admire. "Look at her. She is perfect." They always echoed that word. Perfect. I do not remember anyone ever asking how I felt about having a sister or whether I wanted to hold her. I was old enough to understand that perfection was something I would never be allowed to claim. It started small. Ashley got the bigger bedroom because she needed space for her toys. Ashley got the better clothes because she was harder to shop for. Ashley got the last slice of cake, the better seat in the car, the nicer Christmas gifts. I learned early that asking why meant being told not to be jealous. My mother had a phrase she repeated whenever I questioned the imbalance. "Do not be dramatic. Ashley is younger. She needs more." But it never stopped, even when we grew older. When Ashley was 5 and threw a tantrum so violent she smashed my favorite ceramic music box, I was the one blamed for leaving it where she could reach it. When she was 10 and wanted to join dance class, I was told I could skip my art lessons for a year because money was tight. When I made the honor roll, my mother told people it was because the teachers at our school liked me too much. When Ashley got a participation ribbon in gymnastics, she threw a celebration dinner. The message was always clear. Ashley needed more. Ashley deserved more. Ashley mattered more. I became the child who made her own lunch, who got herself ready for school, who did her homework without being reminded. The easy one, the responsible one, the one who could handle disappointment. The more I succeeded, the more invisible I became. If I got an A, the response was a distracted nod. If I won a small scholarship in high school, the first thing my mother asked was whether it could also be used for Ashley in the future. Meanwhile, Ashley could fail a class and blame the teacher, and somehow my parents would still treat her like the victim. By the time I was 16, I had stopped expecting fairness. I only hoped for neutrality. Something shifted the year my father died. He had always been quieter than my mother, more measured, more patient. I used to think he preferred Ashley just like everyone else, but after he passed, I found documents that made me question everything. He had a separate account in my name. A savings account, college money, emergency money, a small nest egg for the future. It was not much at first, but it grew over time. My mother claimed she never knew about it, but the bitterness in her voice suggested otherwise. She asked me one night why he would leave something only for me. I had no answer. She offered no guesses. I imagine she had several, none of which she liked. After the funeral, she became colder, stricter, almost punishing. It was as if giving me something my sister did not have was a betrayal she could not forgive even though he was gone. Ashley caught on quickly. If I had anything she did not, she demanded it or demanded to know why she did not deserve it. I learned to hide things. New shoes, a birthday card from a friend, even the books I loved to read. She always found out anyway. My mother would call it sibling rivalry, but rivalry requires two people competing. I was never competing. I was surviving. School became my escape. Teachers noticed I worked hard. Friends called me reliable. But the moment I walked through the front door of our house, that version of me disappeared. I was the older sister, the responsible one, the one who should know better. Once, when I was about 17, Ashley shoved me down the stairs after I refused to lend her a sweater. I sprained my wrist trying to catch myself. My mother's response was simple. Why were you blocking her path? When I asked if she cared that Ashley had pushed me, she barely raised her voice. Stop exaggerating. You bruise easily. It was around that time I began to understand something I could not fully articulate until adulthood. My mother needed Ashley to be dependent on her, and she needed me to be the stable one she could drain, the reliable daughter, the fixer, the daughter who would always clean the messes Ashley left behind. That dynamic followed us everywhere. Birthdays, holidays, every major moment in our lives. It was always Ashley's spotlight and my shadow. Even at school award ceremonies, my mother would whisper things like, "Do not brag. Do not make her feel bad." On Ashley's milestones, I was expected to celebrate with enthusiasm. On mine, I was expected to be quiet. When we both reached adulthood, people assumed Ashley and I were close. Sisters usually are. But closeness requires mutual respect, a sense of safety trust. I had none of that with her. I was tolerated. And because I wanted peace more than recognition, I allowed myself to shrink. I became exactly what my family needed me to be. Invisible. That invisibility did not protect me. It only prepared me for the moment when my sister's rage would finally spill over and need someone to land on. And it prepared me for the truth I did not see coming. I was never just the invisible one. I was the useful one. The one whose presence, effort, and resources were meant to fuel Ashley's life. And the moment I stopped feeding that system was the moment everything began to break. My father's will was the kind of secret that lived quietly in a drawer until the day it tried to breathe again. I did not know the details when I was a child, only that after he passed away, something shifted in the air of our house, something colder and sharper than grief. My mother cried at the funeral, but I always suspected she cried more from inconvenience than heartbreak. She remarried within 2 years and told everyone it was because she needed stability. I knew even then that she needed control. One afternoon when I was 19, I came home from college for a weekend visit and found an old file box on the dining table. My mother claimed she was doing spring cleaning even though it was October. Ashley was flipping through some old photo albums while Mom sifted through paperwork, muttering about clutter. Then she stopped, suddenly staring at a manila envelope I had never seen before. Her eyes narrowed, jaw tightening in a way I recognized too well. She said nothing at first. She simply folded the envelope shut and slid it aside, but her movements were too stiff, too deliberate not to draw my attention. "What is that?" I asked lightly, trying not to sound suspicious. "Nothing important." She spoke too quickly. "Just old documents your father never bothered to organize." But she did not put it away. She left it on the table as if daring me to ask again. Ashley glanced up uninterested. She never cared about paperwork unless it involved something she could use. Hours later, when the two of them had gone upstairs, I found myself walking back into the dining room. The envelope was still there. My father's handwriting was on the front. My name, not my mother's. Mine. My hands trembled as I slid the papers out. At first, I did not understand what I was looking at. Legal language, dates, signatures. But the words began to stitch themselves together in my mind. My father had left me the house. Not half, not shared. All of it. And he had left a savings account in my name only. He had written a letter dated 3 months before he passed. In it, he said he wanted me to have a place that could never be taken away from me. A place of my own. A home. I sat down slowly, the weight of his decision sinking into my chest like a stone dropped into deep water. He knew. Even back then, he knew something was wrong. He must have seen the way my mother treated me. The favoritism, the small humiliations, the imbalance. He must have known her nature better than I did. He must have known that giving me something secure was the only way to protect me after he was gone. But my discovery lasted only a few minutes before my mother appeared in the doorway. Her voice snapped like a whip. "Put that down!" I looked up at her startled. "Mom, why did he leave this just to me?" She walked toward me with a smile that did not reach her eyes. "Because he was unfair. Because he never understood what a family should look like. Because he was sick at the end." Her voice dripped with practiced disdain. He did not know what he was doing. My throat tightened. He knew exactly what he was doing. She snatched the papers from my hands so quickly the pages bent. "This house belongs to all of us, not just you." She said the words through clenched teeth. The idea that something in her world was not hers, by entitlement, seemed to unsettle her to the core. When Ashley came downstairs and asked what was happening, my mother pasted on a calm face. "Nothing, sweetie, just paperwork. Nothing you need to worry about." Ashley shrugged and wandered off, but I could feel the tension vibrating in the air. Later that night, my mother knocked on my bedroom door. She entered without waiting for permission. She sat on the edge of my bed and sighed loudly the way she always did before delivering a guilt-laden speech. "Your father was a good man, but he made mistakes. Leaving the house only to you was one of them. It is not fair to Ashley. Or to me." I stayed quiet, unsure what she wanted me to say. She leaned closer. "You are the older sister. You have always had more stability. You should share that advantage with Ashley." I blinked. How is inheriting a house having more stability? She ignored the question. Instead, she reached into her robe pocket and pulled out a document. "I need you to sign something." My heart sank. "Mom." "I am not signing anything." Her smile vanished. "This family needs unity. Ashley needs a place to raise her children one day. You cannot be selfish." I stared at her. Ashley was 20. She had no job, no plans, no ambition other than shopping and dating. And somehow I owed her my future. I pushed the paper back toward her. "I am not signing away the house." She stood abruptly. "Fine, but remember this. What your father left you does not belong to you. It belongs to this family, to Ashley, and she will get it eventually." The threat hung in the air like smoke. Over the next year, she brought it up constantly. Comments slipped into conversations. Reminders dripping with superiority. Ashley would be a better homeowner. Ashley deserves nice things. You would not even have the house without us. Every word chipped at me. Every sentence rewrote my place in the family. I learned to keep my legal documents hidden. I memorized account numbers. I guarded my mailbox. I stopped mentioning the house entirely because every time I did, my mother's eyes lit with something territorial and frightening. They never forgot. They never forgave, and they never accepted it. My father's final act of protection became the one secret that ignited everything that happened later. Because in their minds, his will was not a binding document. It was a mistake waiting to be corrected, and I was the obstacle standing in their way. Ashley's relationship with money was a slow-moving disaster, the kind everyone in the family pretended not to see, because acknowledging it would mean admitting she was not the golden child they had built their identities around. She had always been reckless with spending even when we were young. While I saved birthday money in a small metal box under my bed, Ashley blew hers the same day on glitter pens, costume jewelry, or whatever shiny object she wanted. Mom always laughed and said she had a big personality. I learned much later that big personality was code for no accountability. When Ashley turned 18, the spiral became impossible to ignore. She had just graduated high school with barely passing grades and no real plan for her future. College required effort. A job required responsibility. Ashley wanted neither. What she wanted was the lifestyle of someone whose life had already been handed to them on a silver platter, and for most of her life that had been exactly what she expected. She moved from one impulsive decision to another with the confidence of someone who believed consequences only happened to other people. First, it was maxing out a store credit card on luxury skincare products she claimed she needed to keep up appearances. Then she opened 2 more credit cards behind my mother's back. I overheard their argument the day Mom found out. Ashley was screaming that she had every intention of paying it off. Mom was screaming that Ashley had no job and no intention of getting one. But 2 hours later, they were sitting on the couch together watching reality TV, as if nothing had happened. That was the pattern. Ashley did something irresponsible. Mom scolded her. Ashley cried. Mom forgave her. Douglas, my stepfather, played the role of silent spectator until he was dragged into the financial mess, at which point he would lecture Ashley about responsibility. But he never enforced anything. Ashley knew exactly how far she could push him. Eventually, she pushed far enough that even his patience cracked. By the time she turned 20, Ashley's spending habits had turned into something darker. She bought designer bags she could not afford. She signed up for subscription boxes she forgot to cancel. She borrowed money from friends and conveniently forgot to pay them back. She racked up late fees, overdraft fees, interest payments. And every time she somehow found a way to frame herself as the victim of an unfair world. My mother enabled it without hesitation. She would say things like, "She is just stressed," or "She will get it together eventually." But the truth was simple and undeniable. Ashley believed she did not have to get it together because my mother never made her. Meanwhile, I was working part-time while finishing school, budgeting every dollar, and living like someone who had known responsibility from childhood. When Ashley needed cash, she asked me first. If I said no, she went to Mom. If Mom said no, she went to Douglas. Someone always caved. Someone always paid. And each time she was rescued, she learned the same lesson. Why fix your life when someone else will fix it for you? Eventually, the debts grew too large to ignore. Ashley stopped opening envelopes. She ignored collection calls. She pretended not to hear creditors pounding on the door one afternoon, while our mother whispered frantically to them through the crack in the frame. She blamed the economy, her anxiety, a childhood teacher, she said, had ruined her confidence, even though she had never cared about school to begin with. The truth was, she saw money as something that simply appeared whenever she wanted it, not something earned or managed. The breaking point came one afternoon when Ashley appeared at my door without warning. I lived in a small apartment near campus at the time, scraping by on scholarship money and my part-time job. She barged in without knocking and flopped onto my couch with a dramatic sigh. "I need help," she said, "real help." I sat across from her, already exhausted. "What now?" She twisted her fingers, avoiding my eyes. "I am 10,000 behind." I blinked. 10,000 behind on what? Credit cards, bills, everything. I cannot keep up. I told her I did not have that kind of money. She said something that made my stomach twist. "Mom said you have savings Dad left you. You can afford it." The implication hit me like a punch. She was not just asking. She was expecting. She believed she was entitled to my inheritance because she had lived her entire life believing everything I had should be hers too. I told her no. Ashley stared at me as if I had slapped her. "You are supposed to help family." I did not argue. There was no point. She stomped out, furious, muttering that I was selfish, ungrateful, and heartless. I thought the storm would pass. It did not. Ashley's financial disasters escalated. Collection notices flooded the mailbox. My mother became increasingly frantic, pressuring me to step up and do the right thing. Douglas grew irritated and withdrawn, tired of paying for chaos he had not created. Ashley lashed out at everyone, blaming us all for her mess, even though she had caused every bit of it. Then came the turning point. Ashley started dating a man who looked like stability on paper. A steady job in IT, a tidy apartment, good manners. I hoped maybe he would steer her toward better habits. Instead, she dragged him into her whirlwind. She convinced him she was the victim of an unfair family who never supported her. She told him I was spoiled. She told him Douglas withheld money from her. She told him she had been robbed of opportunities I had stolen. None of it was true, but it did not matter. Ashley's lies were always beautifully packaged. Her boyfriend proposed within a year. That was the turning point for her. Instead of using the engagement as motivation to straighten out her finances, she saw it as a chance to demand more. More money, more gifts, more attention, more everything. And this time, she wanted it from me, because in her world, everything revolved around her wedding. Everything, the debts, the irresponsibility, the chaos, they all built toward one storm. The wedding she expected me to fund, the wedding she believed I owed her, the wedding that would ignite the fuse that eventually led to the knife in her hand. The moment Ashley got engaged, the house transformed into something unrecognizable. It stopped being a place people lived in and became a stage for a performance Ashley believed the world owed her. My mother was the director, Ashley was the star, and everyone else existed only to applaud. Within a week of the proposal, Ashley had created a massive wedding binder full of magazine clippings, Pinterest screenshots, and delusional budgets that made no sense to anyone except her. She wanted a venue with marble floors and chandeliers that glowed like fire. She wanted imported orchids, a live band that charged more per hour than most people earned in a week, a designer dress with a price tag that made my chest tighten, and a guest list long enough to require a second mortgage. She talked about the wedding the way people talk about a cure for illness or a chance at salvation. She needed it. She deserved it. It was her proof to the world that she was winning. None of us ever questioned why she needed so desperately to look like she had a perfect life. Maybe it was insecurity or ego or all the years she spent being told she was special without ever doing anything to earn it. Whatever the reason, she wanted a wedding far beyond anything our family could reasonably afford. And that is where I came in. One Sunday afternoon, my mother invited me to what she called a family meeting. I arrived at the house expecting an actual discussion. What I walked into felt more like an ambush. Ashley sat at the dining table surrounded by binders and spreadsheets she clearly had not created herself. Douglas sat in his usual chair at the end of the table, rubbing his forehead the way he always did when stress was beginning to crack his composure. My mother stood behind Ashley with her arms crossed, her eyes sharp and calculating. She did not even bother with small talk. Ashley has made her final decision about the venue. My mother declared it as if she was announcing a national event. Ashley looked up with a dramatic sigh. "It is the only place that fits my vision." I tried to ask what that meant, but the answer came before I finished forming the question. My mother pushed a glossy brochure across the table. The venue was beautiful. Marble floors, crystal chandeliers, a sweeping staircase Ashley probably imagined gliding down like royalty. But the price tag printed discreetly at the back made my breath catch. "You cannot be serious," I whispered. Ashley flipped her hair. "I am not compromising on my wedding." My mother slid a spreadsheet toward me. "Here is the estimated cost." My stomach dropped. The total was more than $50,000. I looked up slowly. "You do not have this kind of money." My mother nodded with forced calm. "That is where you come in." The words felt like ice water dripping down my spine. "Come again." Ashley rolled her eyes. "You inherited the house. Dad left you money. You have always had more than me. It is only fair that you help." Fair was not the word she wanted. Entitled was, expected was, demanded was. My mother tapped the table. "You will contribute $40,000. I laughed before I could stop myself. It burst out of me like a broken thing. $40,000. Ashley shrugged. "You have a house. You can take out an equity loan or something. You do not even live there." I stared at them in disbelief. This was not a request. This was a decision they had already made. My mother leaned forward. "Think about it. Ashley needs this." I shook my head. "I am not paying for a luxury wedding." Ashley slammed her palm on the table. "You are being selfish." Douglas finally spoke, his voice low and tired. "Maybe she can help a little, but $40,000 is unrealistic." Ashley spun toward him. "You are supposed to support me." My mother turned on him too. "We are doing what is best for the family, and what is best for the family always meant what was best for Ashley." I looked at all three of them and felt something inside me harden. I said no. My mother stared at me as if I had spoken in obscenity. This is your sister. She deserves a beautiful wedding. No, I repeated. I will not fund this. Ashley's face twisted with something venomous. So you would rather watch me struggle? I am not responsible for your debts or your wedding. She stood abruptly, her chair scraping across the floor. You are unbelievable. My mother glared at me. I am disappointed in you. I packed up my things and left the house that night with all of them shouting variations of the same thing. Selfish, ungrateful, unloving. I expected the tension to calm down eventually, but instead it solidified into something worse. Rage mixed with entitlement. Ashley began calling me nonstop. Voicemails full of guilt trips, screaming, crying, and insults. My mother texted me paragraphs accusing me of tearing the family apart. Douglas stayed silent, but his silence felt like complicity. Then Ashley escalated. She stopped asking for money and started demanding it. She sent me invoices. She sent me bills. She sent me links to wedding items she expected me to purchase. When I ignored her, she went to my mother. When that did not work, she went to my extended family. I started receiving messages from relatives I barely knew, all of them saying the same thing. Ashley is devastated. You have a responsibility. You have the money. Help your family. I wanted to scream that my inheritance was not a community pool, that the house was not a gift my mother gave me, that my father had wanted it to be mine and mine alone. But instead, I kept my distance. I worked. I lived quietly. I tried to forget the pressure building around me, until the day everything snapped. Ashley announced she had booked the venue anyway, without the money, without my agreement, without any plan to pay for it. She printed the contract and placed it on my mother's fridge as if it were a school art project. My mother looked at me and said, "You are going to fix this." That was the moment I realized they were not just asking anymore. They were expecting compliance. And when I refused, I unknowingly lit the fuse that would explode at Ashley's wedding. The spiral had reached its final stretch, and it was barreling straight toward me. The invitation to the so-called family meeting arrived by text wrapped in artificial warmth and forced punctuation. My mother sent it first, writing that we all needed to reset and come together with love before Ashley's big day. Ashley followed with a shorter message dripping with passive aggression. We need to talk. Do not be dramatic this time. Douglas sent nothing, which meant he already knew the script and planned to play his part quietly the way he always did. I had no intention of going at first. Everything inside me told me it was a trap. But Evelyn's words echoed in my mind from the last time I spoke to her. If they are escalating, you need to see what they are planning. Do not go blindly, but go aware. So I went. Not because I trusted them, but because I finally understood something that had been simmering beneath the surface for months. People like my family did their worst work behind closed doors, and if I wanted to protect myself, I needed to start opening those doors wide. The meeting was scheduled for 6 in the evening. I arrived at 5:58 on purpose. If they wanted a performance, I would not give them the satisfaction of being late. The moment I stepped inside, I knew I had walked into an ambush. The living room had been staged like a low-budget intervention. Ashley sat in the middle of the couch wearing her most angelic expression, the same one she used when trying to manipulate teachers or men she wanted something from. Douglas sat stiffly beside her, hands folded like he was bracing for impact. My mother positioned herself across from them at the far end of the coffee table, chin raised, eyes narrowed, and spine straight like a judge presiding over a sentencing hearing. The only empty seat was directly in front of all three of them. They wanted me boxed in. I stayed standing. My mother gestured at the chair. "Sit." I ignored the command. "What is this about?" Ashley launched into a monologue she had clearly rehearsed. Her voice trembled in a theatrical way, but her eyes gleamed with satisfaction. "We are worried about you. You have been acting strange. You have been isolating yourself. You have been aggressive. Aggressive!" The word almost made me laugh. I crossed my arms. "What do you want?" Ashley looked dramatically wounded at my tone. "This is not how a family should speak. Mom, tell her." My mother sighed with exaggerated disappointment. "This cannot go on. You refusing to help Ashley spreading tension, creating division." I stopped her. "I am not creating anything. Ashley chose a wedding she cannot afford. That is not my responsibility. Ashley shook her head. You are twisting things. You always twist things. My mother raised a hand like a traffic cop. Enough. We asked you here because we want to make this right. My eyebrows lifted. Make what right? She gestured to Douglas. My stepfather silently reached under the coffee table and pulled out a manila folder thick enough to be concerning. He placed it on the table between us as if presenting evidence in a courtroom. My mother spoke again. These are documents that will solve everything. My pulse quickened. Solve everything. She slid the folder toward me. Go ahead, look. I opened it and froze. Transfers, property agreements, title amendments, signature lines. My name printed on every page. The wording made my stomach twist. They wanted me to add Ashley and my mother as co-owners of the house. Not the portion she wanted. Not half. Everything. The house my father had left me. The house they had spent years claiming I did not deserve. It was all there dressed as a reasonable family solution. My hands felt cold. My mother leaned forward, her voice deceptively calm. The house is too much for one person. It is selfish to keep it all to yourself when Ashley is starting her life. You live alone and you do not even need that much space. Ashley added quickly, Dad never meant for you to hog it. You owe me, you know. Douglas finally spoke after minutes of silence. This is the right thing to do for the family. It binds us together. No more drama, no more tension, no more fighting. Just sign and we can move forward. Move forward. They said it as if my refusal to hand over my inheritance was the only thing preventing our family from achieving world peace. My throat tightened. I looked at the stack of papers again and felt something inside me lift, not like fear, but like clarity. They had planned this, scripted it, rehearsed it, manipulated it into a corner where they expected compliance. But they underestimated me. My mother mistook silence for weakness. Ashley mistook restraint for guilt. Douglas mistook detachment for obedience. They all thought I would fold like I always had because folding kept the peace. I closed the folder calmly. I am not signing this. My mother's expression collapsed into sharp anger within seconds. Do not start. This is what is best. No. My voice was steady. It is what you want. Ashley's mask slipped entirely. You selfish witch. You think you are better than everyone. You think because you have money now you can treat us like nothing. That inheritance should have been mine. My mother turned on her like a lightning strike. Ashley, stop! And then softer to me. Honey, you do not understand what you are doing. Yes, I do. I met her eyes without blinking. I am protecting what my father left me from people who have been trying to take it since the day he died. Silence slammed into the room with an almost physical force. Douglas's jaw tightened. Ashley looked ready to throw something. My mother's voice dropped to a low whisper filled with rage. You will regret this. You are tearing this family apart. No, I said quietly. You did that a long time ago. Ashley shot to her feet. You are ruining my wedding. I stared at her. You ruined your own wedding the moment you decided it should be funded by everyone except you. My mother pointed at the folder. You will sign this eventually. You cannot survive without us. The threat hung there like a thick fog. I picked up my bag. Watch me, and I walked out. I felt their eyes burning into my back, but none of them followed. Not one. That was the night I realized something important. This was never about family unity. This was about ownership, control, entitlement. And they had run out of ways to disguise it. For the first time in my life, I did not feel small. I felt awake. And that frightened them far more than any refusal ever could. Because once someone wakes up, you cannot put them back to sleep. The night before Ashley's wedding should have been filled with excitement rehearsals, last-minute details, and the kind of nervous joy brides usually radiate. Instead, it felt like a pressure cooker waiting to explode. I had no intention of attending anything involving her big day, but my mother called earlier that afternoon and left a voicemail that barely concealed a threat under a layer of sugary sweetness. You will come tonight. No more of your dramatic phases. Ashley needs family around her. If you care about peace at all, show up. I almost deleted the message without listening to the end, but something in her tone made me pause. Peace in her language never meant actual peace. It meant obedience. And obedience was something I had stopped giving freely. Evelyn's earlier advice floated in the back of my mind. When people who abuse power feel it slipping away, they make mistakes, big ones. Be there to witness them. So I went. Not because I wanted to, but because I understood that these people were on the verge of unraveling. And when unstable people unravel, they reveal more than they intend. The rehearsal dinner took place at a tacky mid-range Italian restaurant Ashley claimed was vintage elegant. It was not. The chandeliers were dusty. The carpet smelled faintly of garlic and spilled wine. The staff looked exhausted before the event even began. Ashley arrived wearing a short white dress far too extravagant for a rehearsal dinner dripping in faux diamonds and confidence she had not earned. Her fiancé trailed behind her like an obedient accessory. My mother hovered beside her like a personal security guard, smoothing Ashley's hair and whispering reminders about posture and camera angles. Douglas leaned against the bar, drinking faster than usual. I kept my distance sitting at a table in the corner where no one bothered to greet me. It did not take long for Ashley to notice. She made a show of greeting every other guest first before sauntering over to my table with a smile stretched so tightly across her face it looked painful. "Glad you could make it." Her tone was sharp enough to cut glass. Her fiancé hovered behind her awkwardly, clearly unsure whether to stay close or run. I managed a stiff nod. She leaned closer, lowering her voice. "You still planning to act like a martyr tomorrow?" I ignored the bait. "I am here. That is all you need." She straightened up, flicking her hair. "Actually, what I need is for you to stop ruining things with your negativity." I kept my expression blank and said nothing. Ashley interpreted silence as victory and strutted back to her seat. Dinner dragged on painfully. Toasts were made. Laughter echoed. Ashley posed for photos as if she were starring in a reality show no one had asked for. My mother never stopped watching me, waiting for a misstep, waiting for any sign of disobedience she could twist into justification for the hostility she clung to like identity. At some point after dessert, Ashley disappeared from the main room and my mother followed her. Guests mingled. Douglas started telling work stories to people who pretended to care. I stayed seated, observing everything with a detachment that surprised even me. Then Ashley reappeared alone, wobbling slightly on her heels. Her cheeks were flushed, her eyes were glossy, and her movements grew loose in that sloppy way that only came from too much alcohol mixed with too many unresolved insecurities. She spotted me instantly. For a moment, I thought she would ignore me, but instead, she walked directly toward my table, leaning down with shaky hands braced on the back of the chair in front of me. "I want to tell you something." Her voice was low and conspiratorial, but the words rolled out thick and uneven. She was drunk enough to forget her filters, but sober enough to aim her spite with precision. "You were supposed to sign." My stomach tightened. "Sign what?" She giggled in a way that made my skin crawl. "The house. Mom promised me your house would be mine before the wedding." My breath froze. She kept going. "You were supposed to sign the papers, but you messed everything up like you always do." Fear flashed through me, not because of Ashley's words, but because of the truth leaking out of her like cheap wine spilling from a cracked glass. My mother had promised her my inheritance. Not asked. Not hoped. Promised. Ashley leaned in closer, whiskey on her breath. Mom even said she would help force it if she had to. "You are nothing without us. Nothing." For the first time in my life, I did not feel the familiar sting of being degraded. I felt clarity. A sharp, cold clarity that cut through every lie they had spoon-fed me since childhood. Ashley was drunk enough to tell the truth, and she had no idea she was confessing something huge. I slipped my phone out under the table and tapped record. "What did Mom promise you?" Ashley blinked slowly, her eyelids heavy. "She said the house should have always been mine, that Dad was wrong, that you stole it." She let out a small, bitter laugh. "She said if you do not cooperate tomorrow, she will make you." My chest tightened. "Make me." Ashley nodded dramatically. "Yeah, you know how she gets when people embarrass her." She straightened clumsily and stumbled backward, narrowly avoiding knocking over a centerpiece. Before she walked away, she muttered one last thing. "You should have just signed. Dad left it to the wrong daughter." Then she disappeared into the bathroom, leaving the sour taste of truth lingering in the air. I sat frozen in my seat, the recording saved safely in my phone. It was not enough to prove everything, but it was a loose thread, and loose threads tend to unravel entire tapestries when pulled correctly. Evelyn's voice replayed in my mind. "Be patient. Let them expose themselves. They always do." That night before leaving the restaurant, I stepped outside to breathe. The cold air stung my skin, grounding me. I replayed Ashley's drunken confession again and again until I had the words memorized, until it no longer felt like disbelief but confirmation. They were not simply entitled, they were plotting, planning, coordinating a way to force me out of my father's legacy. And Ashley's wedding was not just a celebration, it was a deadline, a final push to secure what they believed belonged to them. I looked up at the sky, feeling something settle in my bones, a warning and a promise. Tomorrow would not be the battle they expected. The morning of Ashley's wedding felt like stepping into a storm I had seen forming for months, but still could not fully prepare myself for. The air was heavy, thick with perfume and tension, the kind that clings to your skin even after you try to shake it off. I arrived at the White Ridge Country Club earlier than planned because I wanted to avoid walking into a room already poisoned by my mother's accusations or Ashley's theatrics. The venue was breathtaking, the kind of place Ashley must have fantasized about since childhood. Marble floors reflected the chandelier lights. Towering floral arrangements filled the lobby with the scent of roses. Guests in elegant dresses and tailored suits floated between photo stations and the waiting area for the ceremony. No one seemed to sense the brewing disaster except me. I kept my distance, staying near the corner of the lobby where I could observe without being pulled into anything unnecessary. I wore the dress I had altered myself from one of my mother's old gowns, a soft ivory fabric with delicate lace detailing. I had chosen it because it made me feel connected to the only part of my mother I still wanted to remember, the early years before favoritism had turned into weaponry. Unfortunately, the dress did something else too. It made me stand out. The moment Ashley saw me from across the room, her expression twisted not with joy or excitement, but with rage. Her eyes widened, her mouth thinned into a line so sharp it cut through the hum of conversation. She whispered something to her maid of honor and then stormed toward me. Before I could say a word, she grabbed my arm. "We need to talk, now." Her grip was iron tight as she dragged me down the hallway toward the bridal suite, and not a single person intervened. They probably assumed it was just a moment between sisters. Ashley slammed the bridal suite door shut behind us and immediately began pacing, muttering curses under her breath. The room was a maze of garment bags, makeup kits, curling irons, and untouched champagne glasses. In the center of it all stood the towering 3-tier wedding cake on a decorated rolling cart, complete with the silver cake knife and matching serving set. Ashley stopped pacing and spun toward me. "You knew what you were doing." I blinked. "What are you talking about?" She pointed at my dress with a trembling finger. "That dress. That stupid dress. You wore it to outshine me. You always try to make everything about yourself." I took a breath, fighting to keep my voice steady. "Ashley, it is just a dress. This is your wedding day. I am not trying to outshine you." She was not listening. She never listened. Her anger was a living thing pacing the room with her feeding her every delusion. She stepped closer, her face flushed. "You ruined the mood. The photos, the energy. Everything was perfect until you walked in." I backed up slightly, hands raised. "Calm down, we can talk." "No," she snapped. "You are not going to ruin this for me. Not today." She turned abruptly and grabbed the long silver cake knife off the cart. My stomach dropped. "Ashley, stop." She shook her head wildly, tears forming at the corners of her eyes. "I am not going to hurt you. I just need to fix this." Before I could react, she lunged forward and grabbed a fistful of my skirt, yanking it toward her to pull the fabric tight. Her movements were shaky, uncoordinated, fueled by panic and entitlement rather than logic. She raised the knife toward the dress. I am not letting you ruin my pictures. This will teach you. I struggled, trying to pull away from her grasp, but she tightened her hold, her nails digging into my skin through the layers of fabric. She slashed downward, aiming for the lace. In her mind, she was only destroying the dress. In reality, she had no control over the blade she was wildly swinging. The knife sliced through the fabric easily. Too easily. It cut through the lace, through the underlayers, and then through me. A burning pain shot through my side, sharp and immediate. I gasped, my knees buckling as heat spread beneath my hand. I pressed my palm against the wound, instinctively feeling warm blood seep through my fingers. The world tilted for a moment, the ceiling lights spinning into a blur. Ashley froze. Her face went pale. Oh my God! Oh my God, I did not mean to! I just wanted to ruin the dress! The knife clattered to the floor as she backed away from me, her hands shaking. Footsteps echoed from outside the door, and then my mother appeared breathless but disturbingly calm. She took one look at the blood staining my dress and clenched her jaw. She did not rush to help me. She did not move toward Ashley. She did not even pretend to be shocked. Instead, she stepped in front of the door, blocking it with her body. Her voice was unnervingly steady. "You should have known better. You always ruin everything." My vision blurred as the pain intensified. I heard a distant knock on the door and faint voices from outside. Someone must have heard Ashley yelling, but my mother pushed the door closed with one hand muffling the sounds. Ashley was crying now, shaking her head. "Mom, I did not mean to. I swear." My mother shot her a look that shut her up instantly, then turned back to me. Blood dripped through my fingers, staining the once ivory fabric a deep crimson. I stumbled, my legs giving out. I hit the floor harder than I expected. The pain pulsed through me in waves. As I lay there, I saw my mother through half-lidded eyes. She leaned down slightly, just enough for me to hear her whisper. She deserved it. The world went silent around me. The knocking faded. The room dimmed. And the last thing I saw before everything slipped into darkness was the hem of my mother's dress as she stepped backward, making sure no one could open the door and help me. I woke up to the sterile sting of antiseptic and the steady beeping of a heart monitor, sounds so foreign to the chaos of the wedding that for a moment I could not place where I was. My vision came back slowly, the fluorescent lights above me dissolving into focus one harsh inch at a time. The room was cold, the kind of cold that seeped into your bones and reminded you that your life had been in someone else's hands. I blinked several times, trying to steady my breath as a wave of pain rippled through my side. The incision had been cleaned and stitched. A fresh bandage wrapped tightly around my ribs. My mouth was dry, my throat, sandpaper rough. A nurse entered softly, her steps light. She smiled when she saw me awake. "You are safe," she said. "You are at St. Mary's. You lost more blood than we expected, but you are going to be okay." Her voice was comforting, but beneath her words was a question she did not say aloud. How did this happen? Before I could speak, the curtain rustled and my mother stepped inside. Her expression was carefully arranged, the same mask she used whenever she needed strangers to believe she was a compassionate parent. Beside her stood Ashley, her makeup smudged from crying, though I doubted her tears were for me. As soon as the nurse walked away, my mother moved closer to the bed and spoke in a low, stern voice, meant only for me. "When the doctor comes in, you will tell him it was an accident. You leaned too close. You startled her. You fell into the knife." My pulse quickened. I could still feel the cold, sharp memory of her standing at the bridal suite door, refusing to let anyone in, whispering that I deserved it. My head throbbed with the weight of the lie she expected me to carry. Before I could respond, Ashley sniffed loudly. "I did not mean for it to go that far. You know I would never really hurt you." Her words felt rehearsed, fed to her by the woman standing beside her. I stared at both of them, my voice barely above a whisper. "You stabbed me!" Ashley flinched as if the word itself were an accusation too heavy to bear. My mother leaned closer, her nails tapping against the metal rail of the bed. "Do not start. You know how fragile she is. This was your doing. You provoked her." Rage flickered in the back of my throat. I opened my mouth ready to say something I had never said to them before, but the doctor stepped behind the curtain at that moment. He greeted us, checked my vitals, and asked gently what had happened. My mother answered before I could breathe. It was a terrible accident. The girls were helping prepare the cake. There was a slip. The doctor looked at me. Not her. Is that true? My mother's hand tightened around the foot of the bed, hidden from his view, but not from mine, a silent warning. Ashley stared at her feet, trembling. My chest tightened. I wanted to scream the truth, to tell him everything, but the fear was still too raw. The memory of the bridal suite door slamming shut, trapping me inside, felt too vivid. I forced out the words. It was an accident. The doctor nodded slowly, though I could see the doubt in his eyes. He made notes, gave instructions for medication and follow-up appointments, then stepped away to handle paperwork. My mother released the side of the bed and exhaled, satisfied. Good. You did the right thing. Ashley wiped her eyes again. I am sorry, I really am. I did not answer. The silence between us grew so heavy it felt like it might smother me. My mother checked her phone. We need to get back to the venue. The reception is still going. Ashley looked relieved, as if my injury was nothing more than an interruption to her schedule. They walked out together, leaving behind the faint scent of perfume and entitlement. The curtain swayed softly after they left, and then there was stillness. Absolute stillness. No footsteps. No whispered apologies. No returning family members. No one asking if I needed water or pain medication or company or safety. Hours passed. The nurse returned twice, adjusting my IV and checking my blood pressure. She kept looking toward the hallway, waiting for visitors who never came. Are you sure you do not want me to call someone for you? She asked gently. I swallowed hard. No, there is no one. She gave me a long, sad look, as if she saw more truth in my loneliness than I had ever dared to say aloud. When she stepped away, I stared at the empty chair beside my bed. That was the moment I understood something I had been running from my entire life. I did not have a family. I had a group of people who shared my blood, but none of my love. People who walked out on me as easily as they breathed. People who left me bleeding on a floor and hurried back to their party. For the first time ever, the silence did not make me feel invisible. It made me feel free. I spent the first hours after my family left in a strange haze, drifting in and out of pain and disbelief. The hospital room hummed with low machinery noise, and every so often footsteps echoed down the hallway, pulling me halfway back to consciousness. I tried to focus on the ceiling tiles, counting the faint perforations in their surface to keep myself grounded, but each time my mind wandered, it circled back to the same impossible truth. My family left. They walked out of the hospital without hesitation. No follow-up questions, no concern, no guilt, just absence. I should have been shattered. Instead, I felt hollow, as if my emotions had retreated somewhere deep inside, too exhausted to respond. It was in that hollow space that Evelyn appeared again. She entered the room quietly, holding a clipboard, her brown ponytail slightly undone from a long shift. When she realized I was awake, she softened her expression with something warm and grounding. You are awake? How are you feeling? I tried to sit up a little, but the pain in my ribs made me wince. Tired, sore, confused. That seems like a completely reasonable reaction to everything you have been through. Her voice was gentle, but laced with subtle frustration, the kind that came from seeing injustice over and over again. She changed my IV bag efficiently, her movements practiced. After a moment of silence, she asked, Do you remember what happened? Yes, the word came out shaky. And you remember what your family told the doctor? I nodded. Evelyn placed the clipboard on the counter, then turned to face me fully. Her eyes searched mine, and I could tell she was reading not just my expression, but the story beneath it. I want you to understand something. You do not owe your family protection at the expense of your own safety. My mother said not to make things worse. Her jaw tensed. Worse for who? Something inside me trembled. I did not know how to answer. Evelyn pulled a small stool to the bedside and sat down. I need to ask you something as both a medical professional and someone who actually cares about what happens to you. Is that really what happened? Was it an accident? My throat tightened. Tears pricked the corners of my eyes. I wanted to say yes because that would be easier, safer, quieter, but I had spent my entire life choosing silence, and it had led me here bleeding on a ballroom floor while my mother held a door shut. So I whispered the truth. No. Evelyn's eyes softened. I thought so. She leaned in, slightly lowering her voice. I have seen cases like this before. People who are hurt by those who claim to love them. It usually follows a pattern. Control, blame, fear. Then, escalation. My breath caught. Escalation. She nodded. This is not going to be the last time unless you take steps to protect yourself. I opened my mouth to ask how when someone knocked lightly on the half-closed door. Evelyn stood up quickly. You are not supposed to have visitors right now. Wait here. She stepped outside. I heard muffled voices. Then, a moment later, she returned with a tall man wearing a navy blazer and carrying a leather messenger bag. His posture was confident but not imposing, the kind of presence that makes a room feel steadier rather than heavier. Evelyn introduced him. This is David Miller. He is a friend of mine and a lawyer. The first thing I felt was confusion. I did not call a lawyer. Evelyn hesitated, then admitted I did. You need someone in your corner who is not afraid of your family. David stepped forward and extended a hand. His tone was even grounded. I can leave if you are uncomfortable. I swallowed. It is okay. He pulled a chair to the bedside, mirroring Evelyn's earlier posture. I hear you had a rough night. That is one way to describe it. Evelyn remained nearby, giving me encouragement simply by being present. David asked me carefully to walk him through the events as I could remember them. I recounted everything: the dress, the knife, Ashley's attempt to cut the fabric, the slip, the wound, my mother blocking the door, her whisper. She deserved it. My voice cracked at the end. David did not interrupt. He took notes but focused mostly on me, his expression shifting from concern to something sharper. Determination. When I finished, he leaned back in his chair. What happened to you was not an accident. I know, I whispered. And your family's behavior in the hospital. He shook his head. That is not normal. Evelyn crossed her arms. They were adamant about controlling the narrative. David nodded. That tells me they are afraid of consequences. Consequences. The word echoed like a distant bell I had forgotten the sound of. I was so used to being blamed, silenced, minimized, that the idea of consequences landing on them instead of me felt unreal. David adjusted the strap of his bag. I am going to ask you something important. Do you feel safe going back to your home? I froze. The truth came out without hesitation. No. He nodded slowly. That is what Evelyn thought too. He continued. That means we need to take steps. First, we will document everything. Photos of the injury, hospital records, any texts or voicemails from your family, anything that shows patterns of coercion, manipulation, entitlement, or financial abuse. My chest tightened. Abuse. I had never used that word before, not out loud, not even in my own mind. But it fit. Too well. David reached into his bag and pulled out a small digital recorder. I want you to start recording any conversations you have with them from this point on. If they try to pressure you again, if they mention the house, the wedding money, or threaten you in any way, you capture it. I nodded. Evelyn crossed her arms. They have already crossed every line. They deserve to be held accountable. The idea of holding them accountable felt almost radical, like stepping into a world where justice might actually exist for people like me. David continued outlining the steps. Do not confront them directly for now. Do not accuse them. Just gather evidence. Their arrogance will make them sloppy. They will expose themselves. They always do. Ashley's drunken confession from the night before flickered in my mind. Mom promised me your house. You were supposed to sign. I whispered, I recorded something last night. Evelyn's eyebrows rose. That is good. David leaned forward. That could be key. I pulled out my phone and opened the audio file. He listened, eyes narrowing, as Ashley's voice slurred through the recording. Mom said she will make you if you do not cooperate. She said the house was always supposed to be mine. When the audio ended, David exhaled. This is substantial. This shows premeditation, pressure, and intent. My chest tightened. Premeditation, pressure, intent. All words I had never allowed myself to consider. Evelyn placed a gentle hand on my arm. "You are not alone anymore." That simple sentence nearly broke me. I nodded, unable to speak. David stood adjusting his blazer. "I am going to leave you my card. You call me for anything." "Anything," Evelyn added, "and when you are discharged, do not go home alone." My breath shook. Where do I go? Evelyn glanced around as if the room itself were listening. "For now, stay with me." I blinked in disbelief. "You do not even know me." She smiled softly. "I know enough. You deserve safety." Something tightened and loosened inside me all at once, like a knot finally pulling free. For the first time in my life, two people were choosing to stand with me without conditions, without judgment, without asking what they would get in return. Unexpected allies, maybe even the first real family I had ever had. And as terrifying as everything ahead of me was, I felt something I had not felt since I was a child. Hope, not loud or triumphant. Quiet, cautious, but alive. It flickered inside my chest like a match finally striking after years of darkness. And I knew this time I would not let anyone blow it out. I left the hospital the next morning feeling like my body was stitched together with thread too thin to hold me. Every movement tugged at the wound along my ribs, but the emotional heaviness weighed far more than the physical pain. Evelyn insisted on driving me to her apartment so I could shower and rest before deciding my next step. Her home was small but warm, with soft blankets, pale blue walls, and the faint scent of lavender. It felt safer than any place I had lived since childhood, but safety was temporary. Eventually, I would have to face them, and I knew they would not allow my silence for long. On the second day of staying with Evelyn, the text messages began. First from Ashley. "I cannot believe you left the wedding like that. You embarrassed me." Then from my mother. "Enough playing victim. Call me." When I did not respond, the voicemails followed, each one angrier than the last. "This is childish. You are making things difficult for everyone." When I still stayed silent, she escalated to what she believed was the ultimate guilt tactic. "You are tearing this family apart. You need to fix this." That was when I knew it was time. Not because they deserved a response, but because David and Evelyn were right. If I was going to expose what they had done, I needed evidence, and the only way to get it was to step back into their world, back into the lion's den. David met with me at the cafe near the hospital to go over the plan. He looked calm, composed, and far more confident in me than I felt in myself. "You are not going to confront them. You are going to observe them. Let them talk. Let them dig the hole deeper. They always do when they think they still control you." Evelyn sat beside me, protective in a way I had never experienced from anyone outside blood ties. "Remember, she said they are expecting the old you, the quiet you, the compliant you. That gives you power." I swallowed hard. "I do not feel powerful." "You do not need to feel it," David said gently. "Just act like you used to. The evidence will come." And so I went, not to reconcile, not to forgive, but to watch them reveal who they truly were. My mother opened the front door with a look of self-righteous triumph, as if she had willed my return into existence. "About time," she said sharply. I forced a small smile, the kind I had perfected over years of peacekeeping. "I just needed space." She scoffed. Dramatic as always. The house felt suffocating the second I stepped inside. Ashley was seated on the couch, scrolling her phone, her wedding dress bag draped across a chair as if she wanted everyone to remember she was still the center of the universe. Douglas sat beside her, looking exhausted but obediently silent. Ashley looked up at me with a practiced frown. "I guess you are here to apologize." I kept my tone soft. "I did not come to fight." My mother gestured to the armchair across from them. "Sit." I obeyed, slipping my phone into my pocket with the recorder app already running. My mother crossed her arms. "Do you understand what you put us through?" I stared at her calmly. "I understand you are upset." She sniffed. "Upset. Upset does not begin to describe it. Ashley's wedding was supposed to be perfect, and you ruined it with your theatrics. I blinked. I was bleeding. Ashley rolled her eyes. You always exaggerate. It was barely a cut. I touched the bandage beneath my shirt, feeling it ache. I did not argue. Silence is a void entitled people rush to fill. My mother leaned forward. This is why we need to put the past behind us. We need to move forward as a family. That phrase again. I tilted my head. What does moving forward look like? She exchanged a glance with Ashley. Here it comes. My mother pulled out a folder from the side table. The same folder, the same documents, the property transfer, the request to add Ashley and my mother to the house title. My heart thudded painfully in my chest. We need stability, my mother said, and Ashley and her husband deserve a place to start their lives. You are living alone. You do not need a whole house, and you will get married eventually. You can start your life somewhere smaller. Ashley scoffed. It is not that complicated. You just sign the papers so we can stop dealing with this drama. Douglas spoke for the first time, voice low. The wedding debt is piling up. We need solutions, my mother snapped. This is the solution. My pulse quickened. They had not changed at all. They had not softened. They had not reflected. They had not even pretended to care about my injury. They wanted the house, and they thought I had returned to give it to them. I took a breath. I am not signing anything today. Ashley slammed her phone down. You are doing this again. You are making everything about you. I kept my eyes on her. What happened at the wedding was serious. You hurt me. The room froze. Ashley scoffed. Oh, please. You moved. That is why it happened. My mother added immediately. Exactly. You startled her. You lunged. You made her slip. I stared at them, feeling the surrealness of the moment. They had rewritten the story so many times they truly believed their version. My voice was steady. I remember what happened. Ashley laughed, but it came out brittle. Memory can be dramatic. I did not blink, and Mom was there. She blocked the door. She did not let anyone help me. My mother's eyes sharpened. Enough. You are twisting things. She took one step closer, lowering her voice into a hiss. And if you say that kind of lie to anyone else, you will regret it. Not fear, not shame. Clarity washed over me like cold water. They were giving me exactly what I needed. Threats, coercion, manipulation. All of it captured on my phone. I nodded slowly. I am not trying to upset anyone. I just need some time. Ashley groaned. You already took time. You ruined my wedding and disappeared. You owe us this. There it was, the entitlement, the ownership, the belief that my life belonged to them because they had claimed it since childhood. Douglas sighed. Just sign so we can move on. I glanced at him. You were willing to let me sign this when I was injured. He avoided my eyes. My mother's voice sharpened. Enough questions. We are offering you a way back into this family, but you need to show some loyalty. Loyalty. That word hit me like a blade. I thought of Evelyn offering me a place to stay without asking for anything in return. I thought of David showing up simply because someone needed help. That was loyalty. That was chosen family. This was control, and I was done pretending it was anything else. Ashley threw the folder onto my lap. Just sign it. This is the last time we will ask nicely. Her voice cracked with something close to desperation. They needed the house. They needed the money. They needed me to be the old me. I lifted the folder and ran my finger along the edge. Then I closed it carefully, placed it on the coffee table, and stood. I will think about it. My mother's eyes flashed with suspicion. Think fast. I gave a small nod. I will. And then I walked toward the door. Behind me, Ashley shouted, You owe me. Do you hear me? You owe me everything. I paused in the doorway. The old me might have apologized, explained, tried to soothe the fire that Ashley believed she alone owned. But I was not her shadow anymore. I looked back at her, meeting her eyes. I do not owe you anything. Her mouth fell open. My mother stepped forward. If you walk out that door, do not expect us to clean up your life anymore." I smiled faintly, a sad, genuine smile. "I never asked you to." Then I left, closing the door behind me. My hands shook as I stepped into the cold evening air, not from fear, from adrenaline, from liberation, from the knowledge that I had just recorded every threatening word they said. And for the first time, the lion's den did not feel like a place I had barely escaped. It felt like a crime scene, and I finally had the evidence to prove it. I met David again 2 days after the confrontation at my mother's house. We sat in a quiet corner of a coffee shop downtown, the kind of place where the hum of soft jazz made serious conversations feel less suffocating. I handed him my phone with shaking fingers, the recording from the lion's den still sitting in my messages like a loaded weapon. He listened through the entire thing without interrupting, once his expression darkening as every threat, every manipulation, every demand echoed through the tiny speakers. When the audio ended, he leaned back slowly. "This is even worse than we expected." I swallowed my throat dry. "Worse how?" He tapped his pen against the table. "It shows coordination, intent, financial coercion, emotional manipulation, threats, and a clear pattern of trying to force you to sign away assets you legally own." I felt my stomach tighten. Hearing it aloud made it real in a way my mind had never dared to accept. "But that is not the worst part," David added. He reached into his bag and pulled out a stack of printed documents. "I had these pulled from the county's property records office and the bank. You need to see this." He placed the papers in front of me one by one. At first glance, they looked familiar. My name, my father's name, account numbers I recognized, forms I vaguely remembered signing years ago. But then, something slipped loose in my chest when I noticed the dates. These forms were filed after my father died. Signatures I had never written, revisions I had never approved, transfers I had never heard of. I felt a cold rush sweep over me. "I never signed these," I whispered. David nodded grimly. "I know. That is the problem." He slid one particular document closer to me. "Your mother withdrew money from your inheritance the year Ashley started college. But Ashley dropped out after one semester." I stared at the numbers, stunned. The withdrawal was substantial, nearly half of what remained in my father's savings for me. David placed another paper beside it. "She took more 3 years later. Smaller amounts, but still significant." I felt dizzy. My mother always claimed we were tight on money, that Ashley needed support, that I should be grateful for what I had, that I should not hoard what my father gave me. David continued. "And then there is this." He revealed one more document. "A loan taken out in my name. High interest, short term." I felt like the floor disappeared beneath me. "What is this?" "A payday loan," he said softly. "Your mother used your information to take it out." "Why?" David sighed. "To help cover Ashley's credit card debt 2 years ago." My pulse pounded in my ears. She used my name, my credit, my identity, without my consent. David nodded. "That is identity fraud, forgery, financial abuse. Serious charges." I stared at the stack of papers, my vision blurring. All the years I had blamed myself for struggling financially, for not being good enough, for not saving more, for feeling like I was constantly trying to catch up with no explanation. And all along it was her, my own mother, draining my accounts, falsifying documents, using my identity whenever she wanted, taking advantage of the trust I thought was required in a family. I took a shaky breath. Why would she do this? David hesitated for a moment. "Because she believed she was entitled to your father's money, and because she believed you would never question her." Evelyn, who had joined us after her shift, placed a gentle hand on my arm. "You were groomed your entire life to comply. They created the perfect victim." I felt tears gather at the corners of my eyes, not from sadness, but from a kind of grief that felt like betrayal carved into bone. David cleared his throat softly. "There is more." I froze. "More." David pulled 2 additional forms from the bottom of the stack. "These were filed 3 months ago." I leaned in. My breath caught. They were deed transfer drafts, almost identical to the ones they presented to me in the living room, except these had my signature already on them, a forged version. but good enough that someone unfamiliar with my handwriting might not notice. My heart hammered. They were planning to submit these. Yes, he said quietly. If you had resisted long enough, they might have filed them without telling you, or used them to threaten legal action against you. The walls of the coffee shop seemed to tilt. My mother always said family sticks together. She forgot to mention that she believed family also meant ownership. David leaned forward, his voice firm. This is not a messy family conflict anymore. This is criminal. Identity theft, forged signatures, unauthorized withdrawals, coercion, attempted property theft, and physical harm. They crossed every line. I wiped my eyes quickly, anger rising to replace grief. I remembered my mother at the wedding, her calm voice, her cold stare, her whisper. She deserved it. I remembered Ashley's drunken confession. You were supposed to sign. I remembered Douglas sitting silently while they planned to take my home, and I realized each of them had played a part in stripping away the life my father tried to protect for me. David studied my face. You have two choices. I swallowed. What are they? 1. He held up a finger. We proceed quietly. Build the case. Gather more evidence. File charges when everything is airtight. Or 2. He held up another finger. We confront them now, but that means risking them hiding documents, destroying evidence, manipulating the story. I hesitated, my hands curled against the table. Evelyn leaned in. Listen to me. They do not fear consequences because you have never given them a reason to, but you are not alone anymore. You have people willing to stand with you, and they have no idea the kind of evidence you already have. I took a slow breath. I want to do this right. David nodded. Then we build the case. Quietly. Thoroughly. He pointed to the papers. The fraud is your strongest leverage. This alone can bring them down, but paired with the hospital incident, the recordings, and Ashley's confession, he shook his head in disbelief. It is a devastating combination. I stared at the messy collection of documents, recordings, memories, and wounds that represented my past. And for the first time, none of it felt overwhelming. It felt powerful, like bricks I could use to build a defense. Or a battering ram. Evelyn squeezed my hand. You are doing the brave thing. I looked at her, then at David, and felt the truth settle in my chest like a slow, burning flame. They tried to erase my identity. They tried to take my home. They tried to break me. Now they were going to pay for it. Not because I wanted revenge, but because they left me no other choice. And because justice was no longer something I hoped for. It was something I was ready to fight for. When David told me we needed corroborating testimony, someone outside my household who had witnessed the pattern of behavior, I felt a hollow ache settle under my ribs. My family spent years making sure no one ever saw behind the curtain. They fought in whispers, manipulated in shadows, and saved their real cruelty for moments when doors were closed and blinds were drawn. So when David asked, "Is there anyone else who knew your mother before all this? Anyone who saw anything?" I almost said no. But then a memory flickered. My father had a cousin, Aunt Linda, who used to visit when I was young. She had a warm laugh, a soft voice, and she always slipped me peppermint candies when my mother was not looking. I had not seen her since I was 13. My mother always said she was dramatic, a liar, someone who thrived on chaos. At the time, I believed it. Now I wondered if that was exactly why she had been pushed away. I gave David her name. He found her in less than a day. She lived just outside Williamsburg in a modest house with a blue porch swing and wind chimes that whispered every time the breeze touched them. When I stepped onto her porch, she opened the door before I could knock. "I have been waiting for this for years," she said. My heart tightened. "You have." She nodded and guided me inside. The living room smelled like cinnamon and old books. She poured tea into mismatched cups and sat across from me, studying my face as if she were trying to match it to an old memory. "You look like your father," she finally said. "Not your mother. Thank God for that." She took a breath, gathering herself. "When David asked me to meet, I knew it had something to do with them. I have been expecting this since the day your mother kept you from his funeral reception." The words hit me like a blow. My mother always claimed the reception was private. She told me it was only for adults. She told me I was too emotional. She told me people did not want a crying child there. Linda shook her head slowly. None of that was true. Your father wanted you there. He left explicit instructions that you should sit with the family. Your mother locked you in your room instead. I felt my throat tighten painfully. She said I was too young. Linda's eyes softened. You were not too young. She wanted control of the narrative from the moment he passed. She knew the will was coming, knew what he left you, knew she could not touch it unless she separated you from the people who would protect what he wanted for you. I closed my eyes, letting the realization crash over me like cold water. Every lie, every half-truth, every careful manipulation had been part of a larger design. Linda stood and walked to a cabinet, pulling out a thick envelope. I kept these for you. I did not know if you would ever come. She returned to the couch and placed the envelope in my hands. Open it. My fingers trembled as I slid the papers out. Inside was a collection of old letters, copies of emails, and printed text messages. Many were from my mother, some were from my father. Some were between Linda and other relatives I barely remembered. I skimmed the first letter. My mother had written it to another cousin the year after my father died. She complained about the inheritance being unfair. She said things like, I cannot believe he left everything to her, and she will not appreciate it the way Ashley will. My chest tightened as I read. Ashley was barely 8 years old at the time. How could my mother possibly know what she would appreciate? Or maybe that was not the point at all. I looked at Linda. Why do you have these? Because your mother tried to do to me what she eventually did to you. My breath caught. What did she do to you? Linda's gaze darkened. Your mother forged my signature when your grandfather passed. She tried to claim I agreed to forfeit my share of the estate. Fortunately, I caught it in time and fought it. Won, too. But she cut me out of the family after that. Told everyone I was dangerous, unstable, a liar. I felt my stomach twist. That is exactly what she said about me. Linda nodded gently. Of course it is. It is her playbook. She discredits the person she intends to steal from. She isolates them. Then she takes. I flipped through more papers. There were screenshots of old text messages between Ashley and some college friends. She bragged about using my bank card to buy clothes. She boasted that my mother would make me sign over the house one day. She wrote things like, if she gives me trouble, Mom will handle it. Linda leaned in. Ashley has been coached by your mother her whole life. She thinks she deserves everything that was yours. I opened another page. A printed email from a family friend describing how my mother had convinced people I was mentally unstable during high school, that I had angry outbursts, that I stole, that I could not be trusted. None of it was true. Linda watched my expression and placed her hand on mine. They did not just abuse you, they groomed the story they wanted the world to believe. That way, if you ever fought back, no one would listen. I swallowed tightly. This is more than I expected. This is a pattern. A long one. Linda nodded. Your mother did not turn into this overnight. She has always been good at hiding her real face, and Ashley learned from the best. David stepped forward from where he had been quietly reviewing the documents. These are invaluable. They prove intent, motive, and history. This strengthens the case tenfold. Linda looked at him. I will testify. I saw what she did to that child. She pointed gently at me. I saw how she cut her down year after year. I will not stay silent again. A warmth rose in my chest, painful and grateful at the same time. Thank you. Linda smiled, but her eyes carried years of exhaustion. Your father tried to protect you with the only tool he had, his will. But he did not know how ruthless your mother could be. Now it is your turn to protect what he left you. I felt something settle deeply inside me. It was not anger, it was clarity, a sharp, steady resolve. Linda touched my hand one last time. Whatever comes next, you are not alone, not anymore. And as I looked at her at the papers that told a story far bigger and darker than I had ever imagined, I understood something. This was not just justice. This was history correcting itself. David always said that people like my mother and Ashley depended on shadows. They thrived in places where no one looked too closely, where appearances mattered more than truth, where they could twist a story and convince everyone that the version they told was the only one that existed. That was why when he suggested we request the venue's security footage, I did not expect much. My mother was always meticulous. Ashley was always theatrical. They performed for cameras, for neighbors, for relatives, for anyone whose approval made them feel important. I doubted they would be careless in a place filled with recording devices. But then again, even the best performers slip when they think the audience is on their side. David and I drove to the wedding venue on a cold Wednesday morning. The wind whipped through the parking lot, carrying the smell of pine from the holiday garlands still hanging along the building's white stone columns. The venue manager, a tall woman named Rebecca with sharp eyes and a sharper memory, met us at the entrance. When she saw me, her expression shifted from polite professionalism to something gentler. "You were the sister, right? The one who got hurt." I nodded. "Yes." "I remember you," she said quietly. "And I remember your mother. She said you slipped. She said it was a silly accident." Her tone held disbelief. "That is why I made copies of the footage before anything could be deleted." My pulse kicked hard. "Copies." She gestured for us to follow. We walked through the hallway toward her office, passing the reception hall where Ashley had her ceremony. The faint scent of flowers still lingered in the air. I could almost hear echoes of laughter clinking glasses and the murmur of guests blissfully unaware that a crime had unfolded only a few doors away. When we reached her office, she pulled up files on her computer. I saved everything from the dressing suite corridor, the reception hall, and the service hallway near the cake table. I had a feeling someone would come asking questions. David leaned forward. "We appreciate your cooperation." Rebecca clicked on a thumbnail. "This is the hallway camera outside the bridal suite." The footage began. Time stamped the exact afternoon of the wedding. I saw myself in the video walking down the hall, holding the dress I had altered, moving slowly, as if I already sensed the tension in the air. A moment later, Ashley appeared from the opposite direction, her shoulders stiff, her eyes locked onto me even though she pretended to look away whenever someone walked by. David murmured, "She is already escalating here." Rebecca nodded. "Watch this part." Ashley stepped toward me and touched my arm. The footage had no audio, but her body language was unmistakable. She was demanding, aggressive. I hesitated, stepped back, and shook my head. Ashley grabbed the bodice of my dress and pulled me toward the bridal suite. I struggled, but she tightened her grip. Her face twisted in frustration. I felt my heart race as I watched my stomach twisting from the memory. David wrote notes rapidly. "This is physical coercion. It shows she forced you into a private room." Then came the part I dreaded. Ashley shoved open the bridal suite door and pulled me inside. The camera in the hallway did not show what happened behind that closed door, but it captured something even more damning. My mother walked into the frame 10 seconds later. She paused outside the door, looked up and down the hallway, then deliberately turned the lock from the outside. I gasped. David froze. Rebecca whispered, "That is the part that sickened me. My mother locked us in. She trapped me. She wanted no witnesses." David leaned back slowly, his face tightening with controlled anger. "This alone changes the entire case. This proves intent, malice, conspiracy." Rebecca clicked to show the next camera angle. This one was inside the hallway near the cake table. "The audio here works." The video played. Muffled shouting came from the bridal suite. A thud, a scrape, a scream. My scream. It sliced through the speakers with a rawness I barely recognized. The sound made my chest constrict. The staff member at the cake table looked up startled. He started toward the door, but my mother stepped into the frame again, held up a hand, and said something sharply. The staff member hesitated. My scream echoed again. The staff member took a step forward, visibly torn, but my mother leaned in, whispered something threatening, and pointed toward the reception hall. The staff member backed away. David muttered, "Interference." "Obstruction." She prevented assistance. Rebecca switched to the most important angle. This camera was inside the bridal suite. The venue had installed it as a security precaution after a theft incident years earlier. It was a small, discreet lens near the ceiling. They had forgotten to remove it after repairs. My mother clearly did not know it existed. When the footage loaded, I felt chills crawl across my skin. There I was, standing near the vanity mirror, my dress slightly crooked from Ashley's rough pulling. Ashley paced the room like a caged animal, her wedding dress swishing as she moved. She grabbed the cake knife from the table. She waved it toward my dress, her mouth twisting in rage. Even without audio, her fury was unmistakable. Ashley stepped forward and sliced the bottom hem of my dress. I jumped back. She lunged again. The knife glinted under the light. She tried to cut another section. I grabbed her wrist, but she twisted violently. The blade slipped from her control and slashed across my side. I staggered. I fell backward into the vanity, knocking over a vase. Ashley froze for a moment, her expression stunned. Then she dropped the knife and clutched her head, pacing in panic. She was not remorseful. She was worried about herself. The footage continued. My mother entered the room. She stepped over the fallen vase, glanced at the blood on my dress, and instead of helping, she turned to Ashley. The video clearly captured her lips, forming the words, "She deserved it." David paused the frame. This is destruction. This is the moment that seals everything. Rebecca nodded grimly. The rest gets even worse. She let the footage continue. My mother approached me. She knelt down not to help, but to hiss something in my ear. My expression twisted my hands, clutching my side. Ashley hid the knife under a pile of towels. Then she grabbed a makeup cloth and wiped her hands as if she were removing dirt. My mother lifted me under the arms and dragged me toward the door, her face calm, composed, almost bored. As soon as they were out of frame, Ashley adjusted her hair in the mirror, dabbed her eyes to simulate crying, and walked calmly back toward the ballroom. David pressed his fingers to his mouth, stunned. They staged everything. They planned to control the narrative. Rebecca clicked to the final clip. My mother and Ashley returning to the reception area moments later. Ashley faked a stumble, whimpering. My mother played the role of frazzled mother of the bride. Guests swarmed them. No one realized I was lying bleeding behind a closed door. I felt nausea rise, watching them pretend, watching them lie, watching the world comfort Ashley while I bled in an empty room. David closed his laptop. This footage is the nail in their coffin. Rebecca folded her arms. I thought you needed to see it before I hand it over to the police. I nodded weakly. Thank you. She placed her hand on my shoulder. I am sorry you went through that. You did not deserve any of it. When we left the venue, David was silent for a long time. Then he said quietly, "This changes everything. We can move forward sooner than planned. And with this level of evidence, they will not walk away from this. Not this time." I looked out the car window as we drove away, watching the venue fade behind us. For the first time since the wedding, I felt something shift inside me. Not fear, not grief, certainty. The truth was finally louder than the lies. David chose the setting deliberately. Neutral ground. No chance for my mother or Ashley to control the atmosphere. No familiar walls for them to hide behind. No audience they could manipulate with trembling voices or crocodile tears. He scheduled the meeting at his law office in a glass-walled conference room on the 7th floor where nothing could be twisted without a paper trail. I arrived early. My hands shook slightly, but not from fear. It was something else. Something sharper. Something steadier. The hallway outside the conference room smelled faintly of printer ink and fresh carpet. David stood beside the long wooden table, reviewing a neatly stacked pile of documents. When he saw me, he gave a small nod. "Once more, are you sure you are ready?" I took a breath. "Yes. I have been ready longer than I realized." "Good." He clicked a remote, and the wall screen behind him lit up with a paused frame from the venue footage, Ashley holding the knife. Her face twisted in anger. Even as a still image, it was damning. A moment later, Evelyn stepped into the room carrying a thermos of coffee. She squeezed my shoulder. "No matter what they say today, remember this. They are not the ones in control. You are." My heartbeat settled. At 10:43, the elevator dinged. The doors slid open. My mother stepped out first, wearing a cream blazer and pearls, her version of armor. Ashley followed, still pale from the chaos of the last week, her eyes flicking anywhere except toward me. Douglas came last, hands in his pockets, attempting an expression of calm authority. When they entered the room, my mother gave a brittle smile. "We are here to work things out, sweetie. Nothing needs to be dramatic." The word dramatic landed like a slap. I said nothing. David motioned them to their seats. "Thank you for coming. This will be brief." My mother leaned forward immediately. "Before we begin, I want to say that the whole situation at the wedding was blown out of proportion. It was a silly accident. Ashley did not mean to hurt anyone." Ashley nodded quickly. "Yes, it was a horrible misunderstanding. I felt sick listening to them rewrite the story so effortlessly." Douglas crossed his arms. "We came because we want to keep this family together, but the property issue must be resolved. We expect that house to be signed over. It is the right thing." The right thing. After everything. David's expression did not move. "Let us start with the property since you insist on discussing it." He turned to me. "Would you like to speak first?" I shook my head. "No. You go ahead." David placed a file on the table and opened it. Inside were several documents my mother instantly recognized. Her eyes flicked upward. "What are those?" He slid the first page toward her. "This Mrs. Hale is a loan taken out in your daughter's name." Ashley frowned. "What loan?" David's voice was calm. "This is a payday loan you acquired using her signature." The room went still. My mother's face drained slightly. "That is ridiculous. I never." David placed the next page on top. "This is a withdrawal from her inheritance account 5 years ago. Unauthorized. And this one, another withdrawal 3 years later. Also unauthorized." Ashley blinked. "Mom, what is he talking about?" My mother tried to laugh, but it came out strained. "This is absurd. You cannot prove anything." David tapped the upper corner of the forms. "These documents contain forged signatures. Forensics already confirmed the handwriting is not hers." Douglas shifted uncomfortably. "That means nothing. Your analysis could be wrong." David smiled slightly. "I anticipated that response, which is why I obtained a second independent analysis. It also confirms fraud." Ashley's gaze darted between her parents. "Mom, what did you do?" My mother's composure cracked for the first time. "Be quiet, Ashley. This is nonsense. They are trying to confuse us." David continued, sliding out the next sheet. "And this is a deed transfer draft filed 3 months ago. It contains your daughter's signature. Except she never signed it." Ashley's mouth fell open. "You tried to take the house without her knowing." My mother's jaw tightened. "It is a family house. It should be ours. She was never meant to keep it alone." David leaned forward. "The law disagrees, and so do ethics. But that is not all." He clicked the remote. The wall screen flickered to life. The video from the bridal suite began to play. The silence in the room turned suffocating as Ashley appeared on screen, pacing, holding the knife. The moment she sliced the hem of my dress, the moment the blade slipped. The blood. My fall. Ashley's panic. My mother entering and stepping over the vase. Her whisper. "She deserved it." Ashley gasped. "Oh my God! Mom! That camera was not supposed to be..." My mother snapped. "That is not real. That is edited." David paused the footage and looked at her steadily. "It is raw footage provided directly by the venue. Multiple angles, time stamped." My mother shook her head rapidly. "This is taken out of context. I was helping her. Ashley was upset. Anyone would have panicked." David pressed play again. The next segment showed my mother blocking the hallway staff member, preventing him from entering the room after my screams. Douglas muttered under his breath. "Jesus!" My mother grabbed his arm. "Do not say anything." David clicked once more. A new video clip appeared. Ashley in the mirror after leaving me bleeding, wiping her hands, reapplying her makeup, faking tears. My mother stammered loudly. "Stop playing these lies." Ashley swung toward her. "Lies. You told me no cameras were in that room. You said it did not matter because it would look like she tripped. You said." My mother hissed, "Ashley, be quiet." Ashley shrieked, "You told me she deserved it." And then came the moment everything shifted. The conference room door opened. 2 uniformed officers stepped inside. Ashley froze. Douglas swallowed hard. My mother's face went shock white. David stood and addressed them calmly. "Officers, these are the 3 individuals I informed you about." My mother stood up abruptly. "What is this? Why are the police here?" The first officer spoke. "Mrs. Hale, you are under investigation for identity fraud, financial exploitation, obstruction of emergency assistance, and conspiracy to commit property theft." My mother staggered backward. "That is insane! I am her mother! Mothers do not get arrested." The officer did not flinch. "That is incorrect, ma'am." "They do when they commit felonies." Ashley began to cry. Actual tears this time, not the kind she practiced in mirrors. The second officer turned to her. "Ashley Rowe, we have a warrant for your arrest for battery causing bodily harm, reckless endangerment, and participation in a coordinated attempt to deprive a legal beneficiary of inherited property." Ashley backed away. "I did not mean to stab her. It was an accident." I screamed. It was the dress. I was overwhelmed. It was stress. My mother stepped between her and the officers. "She is emotional. You cannot treat her like a criminal." Douglas rose slowly with trembling hands. "This cannot be happening. We are a good family." David folded his arms. "No. You are a family that has hidden your crimes for years." The officer approached Ashley. "Please turn around." Ashley screamed. "No! No! You cannot do this." She pointed at me with shaking fingers. "She stole everything. She stole the life meant for me. She owes me that house, that money. She owes me everything." Her words filled the space like poison. For the first time in my life, I did not shrink under them. I simply watched. As the officers cuffed her, her knees buckled and she sobbed into the polished table. My mother lunged at the nearest officer, shouting, "Do not touch her! You cannot take my daughter!" The officer grabbed her wrists, securing the cuffs with practiced efficiency. "Mrs. Hale, you need to calm down. You are under arrest." Douglas stepped back, face gray. The officer turned to him. "Sir, you are not being arrested today, but you are being summoned for questioning regarding your involvement in concealing the assault and participating in coercive attempts to seize property." Douglas collapsed into a chair. When the officers led Ashley and my mother toward the door, Ashley twisted one last time to scream at me. "You deserved it. You always think you are better than everyone. You deserved everything that happened." I looked her in the eyes. "No. I deserved to be safe, and now I finally am." They dragged her from the room. The door shut. Silence fell like dust settling after a long, violent storm. David exhaled slowly. "It is done." Evelyn touched my back gently. "You did that. Not luck. Not chance. You." For a moment, I could not speak. The weight of years lifted so suddenly, so completely, that I felt lightheaded. My mother's voice no longer haunted the edges of my mind. Ashley's jealousy no longer took shape in every room I entered. Douglas's cold silence no longer dictated the pace of my life. I stood by the window watching police lights flicker against the winter sky, and for the first time in my life, I felt free. The ripple effect began within hours. Not days, not weeks. Hours. The moment Ashley and my mother were escorted out of the law office in handcuffs, the image of them being placed into separate patrol cars spread through town like wildfire. It started with a single witness who happened to recognize my mother in the parking lot. By evening, a blurry cell phone video was circulating on local social media pages with captions like "Bride's family arrested after wedding incident" and "Mother of the bride taken into custody amid fraud investigation." By the next morning, their downfall was the only thing people in our community were talking about. I was not surprised. My mother spent years curating a pristine image. Garden club president, neighborhood committee treasurer, volunteer coordinator for holiday drives. The type of woman who knew exactly which wine to bring to which dinner and which neighbor to charm to secure influence. She built her reputation like a glass tower. One tiny crack was all it took for the entire structure to shatter. Ashley's collapse was even faster. Her fiancé Ryan was the first to abandon ship. According to a mutual acquaintance, he confronted her at the county holding facility after her arraignment. He asked her if the footage was real. Ashley apparently tried to claim she was framed, that I had manipulated everything to sabotage her big day. The acquaintance said Ryan listened for less than a minute before standing up and saying, "I cannot marry someone who attacks her own sister." Then he walked out and never returned. Within a day, Ryan's mother posted a carefully worded statement online saying their family was distancing themselves from the Rowe family drama. Ashley's phone was confiscated during processing, but messages still poured into her accounts from friends who had seen the headlines. Most were not supportive. They called her cruel, dangerous, a liar. It stunned me how quickly the people she once impressed with her dramatics now saw through her. She always assumed everyone adored her. She never understood that outside of our household, people do not tolerate cruelty when it comes to light so plainly. Meanwhile, my mother's world imploded in slow motion. The organizations she was part of began issuing statements filled with passive phrases like regrettable circumstances and until further notice. Her name was quietly scrubbed from websites. The charitable groups she used to lead removed her from their contact lists. Neighbors who once gathered around her at block parties now crossed the street to avoid being seen with her. And then there was Douglas. His job had always been tied to community reputation. He worked in real estate development, an industry built entirely on trust, image, and relationships. When news broke that he was under investigation for aiding in the concealment of an assault and participating in an attempted fraudulent property transfer, his company suspended him immediately. 2 days later, they terminated his employment altogether. A friend of his once told me that Douglas believed he was immune to consequences because he always knew how to talk his way out of trouble. He had never needed to face the fallout of his choices. Watching him unravel from a distance felt surreal. I learned through David that Douglas tried to present himself as a victim during initial questioning. He claimed he was manipulated by my mother, that he never knew the full extent of her behavior, that he did not understand the inheritance situation. The investigators did not buy it, and even if they had public perception, had already turned against him. People whispered things like, if he did not stop it, he allowed it, and bad men hide behind good suits. Their home was no longer the polished centerpiece of the neighborhood. It became a quiet, cautionary tale. Reporters began calling, creditors too. David told me that several financial accounts under my mother's name were frozen for suspected fraudulent activity. Their mortgage, which my mother loved to brag about paying early each month, suddenly fell behind. The image she spent decades perfecting was collapsing under the weight of its own deceit. And still, not once did any of them call to apologize, not to ask how I was, not to acknowledge the pain they caused. Instead, they fell deeper into the versions of themselves they had always been when no one was watching. Ashley blamed everyone but herself. My mother blamed the system, the cameras, me. Douglas blamed the economy. Meanwhile, my name came up in legal updates and community gossip, but always with a tone I had never heard before. Sympathy, understanding, respect. Evelyn told me that some of the nurses at the hospital had recognized me from the news and quietly said things like, "Good for her," or "I hope she gets justice." For once, the narrative was not twisted to make me the problem. Truth finally had the microphone. Weeks passed. Each brought new consequences for them. Ashley's credit accounts were flagged for suspicious co-signing patterns. Investigators discovered she had been using my mother's identity to obtain store cards. My mother was caught shifting money between accounts in an attempt to hide what she had taken. The prosecutor added charges. Douglas's assets were reviewed. It turned out several were purchased using funds siphoned from my father's accounts years earlier. Their lawyer, whoever he was, had an impossible job. The community did not shield them anymore. Friends who used to attend parties at their house now distanced themselves entirely. Some said they felt ashamed for never noticing the signs. One of the neighbors even emailed David privately with a statement saying he remembered hearing shouting in that house often, but assumed it was normal family arguing. He said he felt complicit. It was strange. For so long, I felt invisible. Now the truth made me visible in ways I never expected. But visibility did not mean chaos. It meant clarity. It meant freedom. While their world crumbled, mine steadied. I got up in the mornings and made coffee without flinching at the thought of my phone ringing. I walked through my neighborhood without feeling like someone was watching, judging, or waiting to drag me back into their dysfunction. I went to physical therapy for my injury. I began trauma counseling. I spent afternoons with Evelyn helping her organize files and outreach materials for the Safe Homes program. It astonished me how quickly life could change once fear stepped aside. One afternoon, David called and said, "You should know that your mother attempted to post bail using funds from an account flagged during the investigation. It got denied. Ashley's bail conditions were stricter due to the violence involved. Douglas is cooperating now, but it will not save him from charges entirely. The cases are moving forward." I nodded, even though he could not see me. "Thank you." I hung up and stared at the sunlight coming through my kitchen window. Their collapse was not something I celebrated. It was something I observed, like watching a house of cards fall exactly the way gravity intended, a predictable consequence of decisions they had made long before I ever fought back. One morning, as I walked past a local cafe, I overheard two women discussing the incident. They did not notice me. One said, "Imagine stabbing your own sister over a dress." The other said, "The dress was just the excuse." Those people were dangerous long before that wedding. I kept walking, but something in me eased. They saw the truth. The world finally saw what I had lived with for so long. And as my mother, Ashley, and Douglas faced hearings, investigations, and public scrutiny, I realized something important. Their collapse was never my victory. My victory was simply this: I was no longer standing alone in the wreckage they created. I was walking away from it. The dust did not settle all at once. Healing never arrives in a dramatic sweep like people imagine in movies. It comes quietly in small shifts, in gentle realignments of the soul, after years of being bent out of shape. Mine began with something simple: silence. Not the dangerous, suffocating silence of my childhood home, where fear lived between the walls and cruelty hid behind closed doors. This silence was different. It was warm. It was steady. It belonged to me. In the weeks after the arrests, I moved fully into the house my father left me. For the first time since I was 14, I walked inside without hearing my mother's sharp voice or Ashley's mocking laughter echoing in the back of my mind. The house felt larger than it ever had, not because it was physically different, but because the weight that once crushed the air inside was gone. I opened windows that had not been opened in years. Fresh air poured inside like a blessing. I cleaned room by room, not because the house was dirty, but because scrubbing away their fingerprints felt like reclaiming territory. Their voices no longer lingered in the corners. Their shadows no longer stretched across the walls. I painted my bedroom a soft green. I replaced the heavy curtains with ones that let in sunlight. I hung a framed picture of my father above the mantel. His smile brought me comfort in a way it never could when they controlled everything around me. Evelyn visited often. She would sit at my kitchen table drinking tea while folding outreach pamphlets for our Safe Homes program. She never treated me like a victim. She never looked at me with pity. Instead, she looked at me the way people look at a newly planted tree, not with sorrow, but with belief in what it could become. David checked in as well. He updated me on court developments, but he also asked how I was sleeping, whether my injury still hurt, whether anything felt overwhelming. At first, I did not know how to answer simple questions like, "How are you doing?" The truth was, I did not know myself outside of survival mode. I had spent so many years trying not to be hurt that I had no idea what it meant to simply be. Therapy helped. The counselor listened to the parts of my story I had never spoken aloud. Not just the knife or the fraud or the manipulation, but the quieter wounds. The birthdays ignored, the achievements belittled, the nights filled with guilt. Sometimes I cried. Sometimes I sat in silence. Sometimes I laughed unexpectedly when recalling something absurd my mother once said to justify Ashley's behavior. Healing, I learned, is not linear. Some days I felt whole. Some days I felt like I was made of cracked glass. But each day I woke up in a house that was mine, not theirs. That alone was victory. As spring approached, the legal cases against them reached resolution. Ashley accepted a plea deal that included probation-mandated counseling and a restraining order that kept her hundreds of feet from me. My mother was charged with fraud and financial misconduct. She avoided jail through a plea agreement, but lost access to all accounts she once controlled. She was ordered to repay what she had taken. Douglas faced lesser charges, but was still marked by his involvement. Their reputations never recovered, their social circles dissolved, their influence evaporated. Some part of me expected to feel triumphant, to feel vindicated, to feel the thrill of justice crashing down on them. Instead, I felt something quieter. Peace. Not forgiveness. Not bitterness. Just release. My world expanded as theirs shrank. I joined Evelyn at the Safe Homes outreach events. At first, I stood in the background handing out pamphlets offering quiet words to women who trembled as they approached. But eventually, Evelyn nudged me toward the front. "They will hear you differently than they hear me," she said gently. "You lived it. Your voice carries a truth that survivors recognize instantly." So, I spoke. The first time my hands shook. I told only pieces of my story. The humiliation, the manipulation. The moment I realized silence was not protection. Tears pricked my eyes, but I kept speaking. Someone in the crowd whispered, "That happened to me too." And another nodded, and another. Over time, I learned when to pause, when to breathe, when to let the room sit in its own quiet grief before lifting it again. My voice grew steadier, stronger, not loud, not forceful, but grounded. I became part of the organization. I helped survivors build documentation. I taught them how to gather receipts, texts, voice messages, photos. I showed them how to speak to lawyers and how to appear calm in court, even when their hands trembled. I learned that empowerment did not require rage. It required clarity. And I had more clarity now than I ever believed possible. 1 year after the wedding incident, the community center held an event for survivors. It was larger than anything we had done before. Evelyn organized it, David sponsored it, and they asked me to speak. I stood at the podium looking out at the rows of people. Some were bruised. Some were exhausted. Some were terrified. But all of them were looking at me with something I recognized. Hope. I began at the beginning. I told them about the dress, the knife, the blood on the bridal suite floor. But I told them what mattered more. The knife was not the beginning of the story. It was the final chapter of a book written in small cruelties. I told them about the years of emotional neglect, the manipulation, the silence that grew heavy enough to crush a person from the inside. I told them that the moment I pressed that emergency alert was not a moment of weakness. It was a moment of rebellion. Surviving is not the same as living, and living begins the second you stop apologizing for the pain someone else put in your hands. I watched the room shift. I watched shoulders straighten, jaws tighten, tears rise. I ended with the words I wished someone had once said to me. Blood does not make family. Safety does. When I stepped back from the microphone, the applause was not thunderous. It was soft, steady, real. Afterward, people approached me, not for autographs or photos, for something more intimate. They told me their stories. One woman whispered that she planned to leave her husband. A teenager said she finally understood that what her aunt told her was not love. A man said he would help his sister gather evidence for court. Evelyn hugged me tightly afterward. "You changed lives today." I shook my head. "I just told the truth." "Sometimes the truth is the only match people need to see the door that has always been there," she replied. As summer began, I transformed my house into a place of healing. Warm colors, soft lights, fresh flowers, quiet corners filled with books. I bought myself a small rescue dog who followed me everywhere, his presence reminding me that unconditional loyalty exists in the world. I cooked meals that tasted like comfort. I slept through the night. I breathed. Every so often, news about my mother or Ashley surfaced. I never looked for it. But sometimes, the world has a way of reminding you how far you have come. Ashley had moved out of state under supervision. My mother lived privately, her social circle gone. Douglas relocated. Their absence no longer felt like a hole. It felt like space. Space I filled with peace with people who saw me with a version of myself I had not known I was allowed to grow into. On the anniversary of the day I left the wedding venue in an ambulance, I stood by the river alone. The evening light shimmered on the water. The breeze brushed against my skin like a gentle reminder that the world keeps moving, even when you think you cannot. I closed my eyes and whispered the same words that freed me 1 year earlier. It ends now. But this time it was not a plea. It was a declaration, a beginning. I opened my eyes, took a long breath, and let it out slowly. Then I said something new. I see you. Whoever you are, wherever you are not alone. You deserve more than silence, and you deserve more than pain disguised as love. I turned toward home, each step steady, each step mine. My life did not begin with the knife. It began the moment I chose myself. And that choice, I realized, was the quietest, strongest kind of victory. If you've stayed with me through this entire journey, then maybe you saw something familiar in these moments, in the cracks between the words, in the places where someone's dignity was taken quietly long before a knife ever touched skin. Maybe my story reminded you of a childhood you survived, or a marriage you escaped, or a relative who told you that loyalty meant silence. And I want to tell you something from the deepest, truest place inside me. You were not imagining it. You were not dramatic. You were not the problem. If someone made you feel small so they could feel powerful, that was not love. If someone insisted you surrender your joy so they could shine brighter, that was not family. If someone used guilt as their language and control as their currency, that was not your failing. It took me years to understand that survival is not the same as living. Years to understand that protecting someone else's feelings at the cost of your own safety is not noble, it is conditioning. Years to accept that sometimes the people who share our blood are the first to betray us and the last to admit it. And if you are watching this now carrying stories in your chest that you've never dared to speak aloud, I want to say something I wish someone had said to me. You deserve a life where you can breathe. You deserve a life where you are not walking on eggshells. You deserve to wake up without that heavy pit in your stomach wondering what version of someone you will face that day. You deserve to feel safe in your own skin, safe in your own home, safe in your own story. For so long, I believed healing meant pretending nothing happened. But healing is actually the opposite. Healing begins the moment you admit something did happen and that it mattered. Healing begins the moment you stop explaining away someone's cruelty. Healing begins when you start choosing yourself, even if your voice shakes when you say the words out loud. And if you're watching from a place of hurt, or fear, or confusion, or exhaustion, I hope you know this. You are not alone. There are people who will believe you, people who will help you gather your courage piece by piece, people who will stand with you the way Evelyn and David stood with me, people who will not let you be silenced anymore. And maybe that community begins right here in this comment section where strangers from all over the world remind each other that survival is not shameful, and speaking up is not betrayal, and choosing peace is not selfish. If you've ever lived through something like this, if someone tried to dim your light, or take what was yours, or rewrite your story so they could walk away clean, I hope you'll share even a small part of that journey below, not to relive it, but to release it. Your words might be the reason someone else finally realizes what is happening in their own life. Your courage might be the spark someone else needs to take their first step. And if you've never experienced anything like this, but you felt anger on my behalf, or heartbreak or disbelief that a family could go so far, I would love to hear your perspective too. Tell me what part struck you the most. Tell me if someone in your life taught you what love should look like. Tell me what you would say to someone who is still trapped where I once was. And if you want to support this channel, the best way isn't liking or subscribing, it's joining the conversation. It's lifting each other up. It's making this space a place where truth is heard, pain is honored, and healing feels possible. Because the truth is simple, and I'll leave you with this: blood does not make family. Safety does. And if no one has told you this today, let me be the one to say it. You matter. Your story matters. Your voice matters. and you deserve a life that doesn't hurt to live. So tell me where you're watching from. Tell me how this story made you feel. And if you're ready, tell me your truth. Someone reading the comments may need your words today.